I gotta tell somebody.
This is the best thing I've ever seen.
That. Let's talk about that.
You need this. Listen to this.
Memorable and exciting.
Well, then be less boring.
I'm going to tell everyone. Wait here.
Mighty remarkable, Big Daddy.
Remarkable.
Welcome to Remarkable, a podcast for B2B marketers that deconstructs the most iconic moments in film, television, pop culture, and advertising for a single purpose: to give you, the B2B marketer, the same storytelling techniques that the pros use. In each episode, you will learn techniques from Hollywood, Pixar, Marvel, and beyond, from Spielberg's hands to yours, bringing remarkable content ideas to you every single week. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. This is Remarkable. This week, we're talking about marketing lessons from Silicon Valley. With the help of our special guest, LaunchDarkly CMO Manish Gupta. Manish, how are you?
Good, Ian. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to have you on the show. We're going to chat marketing. We're going to chat Silicon Valley, both the show and the place, and everything in between. So why the heck did you pick Silicon Valley to talk about today?
You know, I've been a B2B marketer for a long time, and I don't think there's any show that does as good a job as Silicon Valley does on depicting the nuances, the idiosyncrasies of building a company from scratch, taking it to market, and all of the dynamics that ensue along the way, both internal and external. I think they just cut through the craziness and just bring realities and the challenges that are faced by founders and team members right to the surface for somebody who may be very removed from the startup world of technology and makes it real for them. So yeah, I relate to that quite directly.
Oh my goodness. What was the first moment that you felt like seen by Silicon Valley, or maybe just a moment that stands out to you?
There are many. You know, one that sticks with me is Yang talking about artificial intelligence, coming up with this app that you take a picture and the app will tell you what the picture is about. And this, of course, goes back many years.
Yep.
But in that episode, Jimmy takes a picture of a hot dog and the app says it's a hot dog. And then there's all this excitement on the set.
Not hot dog.
Wait, what the fuck?
Eh?
That's it? It only does hot dogs?
No, and a not hot dog.
Give me that. Give it to me.
And then, a couple of seconds later, they take a picture of pizza. And of course, you're expecting the app to say pizza, but the app says not hot dog. And it's just such an interesting moment where, as you develop in technologies, you fail so many times before you get the right answer. And that was just so, in such a short snippet, it was captured beautifully. And I just relate to that working with engineering teams over my career. How many times you expect a result and you get just the opposite or you get no result. So that was a really good moment.
Yeah, that's so good. The two that jumped out at me are the game Always Blue.
Always blue! Always blue! Always blue! Always blue! Always blue!
That startups are so weird and quirky, and it's such a just like tight-knit little group of just quote-unquote smart people that just are also idiots. And it has these little moments where it's just that the weird thing about your company that y'all do for whatever reason, and then playing that game, I saw that and I was like, oh my gosh, they totally get it. They totally get that there is a heart behind this whole thing, and there is a camaraderie and a sense of moment in time behind this beyond just the jokes. That it's like, there is something here that the reason why we can make fun of it is also because like it is, quintessentially human. And maybe I read into that a little bit more than other people who watch the show. But to me, I think it gets at the humanity of the building, which is
totally. And, so many times you look at teams that have succeeded and you try to connect the dots. And when the success happens, you're like, yeah, it's because the personalities melded together. It's because it was the right timing. But before the success, as the sausage is being made, so to say, you look at people and say, are these folks really going to make it happen? And similarly, the cast that they pulled together in Silicon Valley is odd characters that together we may never get anything done, but they do make progress and they fail and they succeed, and it's on, ups and downs for them, which is just the nature of building a startup. Yeah, it's very, very natural.
Yeah, I just think that if you're just showing the business, which is what we do as marketers so often, we just show the business. We just show the case study. We show the results. We show the ROI, but we don't show the humanity. And that was what I loved about this show, is it showed all of the humanity and egos and silliness and weirdness. And that's why that scene just resonates for me, is after a super long day or a long weekend or a long thing of, busting their ass trying to make a startup, that they play a game where they just, throw a ball up in the air. And it's sort of, what you're doing when you're not working is just as important to a startup as what you do when you are.
Yeah, it's the humans that bring it to life. They bring technology to life. And that actually translates into everyday sales cycle, everyday marketing endeavors at companies. If you don't relate it to the human side of things and you don't bring that to the surface, how do you pull the teams together that have to go through the ups and downs, the challenges and the successes? And you have to be empathetic to those human attributes that you can use to put the people together, to keep the fabric going for the company, and to be able to go to the other side of the challenges. So yeah, you're exactly right.
And then, for you today, you're the CMO of LaunchDarkly, this amazing company, and you've had a unique route to being a CMO. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I started out as an engineer. I got my undergrad and master's in engineering from Georgia Tech, moved to Silicon Valley a long time ago, and was a product leader for a while, and then, learned what marketing is all about at Apple, and haven't looked back since then. It's been an interesting combination of, how do you tell a story? How do you connect with the audience? How do you do it in a creative manner? And of course, all of the mechanics that underpin that endeavor. But what I find interesting and sort of what has worked well for me is the technology underpinning. As a marketing leader that's trying to sell and position technology that solves a problem in the marketplace, you are able to do that better with that technology background. And if you're anchored on the core strengths of where the product is coming from, you can just be more natural and be able to be more creative and be able to connect the dots better from the core of the bits and bytes, the ones and zeros, all the way to the problem that is actually being addressed by the product or the solution. So as I found that's worked well for me. It's not that other CMOs don't, succeed without that, but that's just something that's worked well for me.
And where's LaunchDarkly at in terms of scope and scale?
Yeah, the company is doing very well. We are a couple of $100 million in ARR and breaking even today, growing at a healthy clip, about 500 employees, 6,000 plus customers, 25% of the Fortune 500 are LaunchDarkly customers. So it's a horizontal play. So we have customers at almost every vertical you can think about, ranging from high tech to financial services to e-commerce to communications.
Meredith, what the heck is Silicon Valley?
So Silicon Valley is a show that parodies life in the tech industry, and specifically what working for a startup is like.
That is Meredith O'Neill, our amazing producer extraordinaire.
The creator, Mike Judge, who's known for King of the Hill and Beavis and Butthead, had actually been an engineer in the tech industry previously, so he had this personal connection to it. And it was when he was working on a movie about big US tech companies when he came up with the idea for the show. But it wasn't until HBO came to him looking for a TV show about gamers that Judge sort of saw his window. He was like, well, I don't really know that much about gaming, but I did work as an engineer in Silicon Valley, and he suggested doing a project about that. And so they signed on, long story short. But what stands out to me about this show is a lot of the success is because it was deeply researched. And Judge and his team, so they went and they visited tech companies all over Silicon Valley, including Google and Apple. They even went to events like TechCrunch Disrupt. And so they really sort of steeped in themselves in the world of the tech industry. And so was super well researched to the point where people were like, this show is like a little too close to home. And they called it like a documentary.
We can offset a lot of that once we get a few customers and start a subscription revenue model.
What? Revenue? No revenue. I'll call you back. What? Why would you go after revenue?
Because to make money?
No. If you show revenue, people will ask how much, and it will never be enough. The company that was the 100Xer, the 1000Xer becomes the 2X dog. But if you have no revenue, you can say you're pre-revenue. You're a potential pure play.
And it made me think of the show The Bear and how that's hard for like chefs and line cooks to watch. Like Ian, you mentioned your wife has a hard time watching it because she was a chef in a former life. And so, but the thing is, like, the show is meant to be satire, but some of the characters are actually based on real people. They didn't mention who, but I think you could probably kind of guess here and there. And they used real events and storylines as inspiration as well. They play a lot on the absurdities and contradictions that are sort of inherent in the industry. Thomas Middleditch, who plays the founder of Pied Piper, which is like the fictional tech startup, said, it seems like you can't hyperbolize it for a joke hard enough. And so that's like the detail of the show. It was super, super important for them. And every time they showed a line of code or something written on a whiteboard, they had tech insiders or leaders sort of review it to make sure that it would withstand scrutiny from any programmers who might be watching the show, which I thought was really interesting. But all of that shared with you all, Manish, I'm wondering like if there was a particular scene that sort of really rung home for you, where you were like, oh my gosh, this feels real. This feels like I've lived it.
Yeah. There are a few. I would say there are several, but one that comes to mind, I think they called it Batmanity Insanity, where we're required to raise some money, and in order to look better than they actually were, they had a bot that would run up the number of users, the daily active users. And so the numbers look very good. However, you have to defend those and sustain those over time.
Hey, Jared. Are those numbers legit?
Of course.
All right, then.
This is Jared.
So, are we happy?
Yeah, it worked out great. So let's keep the 7,000 users that I bought and add another 1,000 a day for the next week.
You got it, buddy.
Right.
And of course, that fell flat afterwards. So, they were shining in the moment, but couldn't sustain it. So, a big lesson for me is as the entrepreneurs and marketeers are building these startups, there are many challenges, and it's very easy to get swayed by the hype. It's very easy to fall into the trap of you have to look better than you actually are today because the round has to close and the valuation has to be higher and so on. That if you lose your anchor on the pragmatic reality and the data set that makes you credible, it's hard to sustain that hype. And I think the teams, the entrepreneurs, the marketeers that anchor on truth and run their models and their positioning in the market with that can sustain the growth and eventually sustain success and achieve success. I think that episode was a reminder how many entrepreneurs and how many marketeers get carried away, which not helpful in the long term.
Yeah, that's a great one. And boy, is that one pulled directly from reality. Well, one of the things, Meredith, you alluded to that I find really fascinating about it is sort of like who they pulled inspiration from. And I talked to one of the writers that was on the show, and he told me that a lot of that is actually not as true as people think, that people often say that this person is supposed to be this person and this person is supposed to be this person. And usually people are actually wrong about that certain characters, they just made up weird characters and that they're actually not supposed to be, this person. There's a few characters that people are like, oh, this is definitely this person. It's actually, was meant to be someone else. I think that stuff is really fascinating. And it speaks to the sort of like the art of this, of like how well they made the show, that they made these characters that are so rich that you can see multiple different people in them. And I think that that's like a huge takeaway for this, from a B2B marketing perspective, is like so often we we don't like, we want to, especially with anonymized content, which is like really difficult, but like you can paint a picture of someone really well, make them 3-dimensional and give them a lot of human characteristics and tell a story about that person in a way that everyone's like, oh my gosh, that's just like me. You know, even if it's not at all, or even if it's supposed to be someone else. And I just thought that was interesting where they did do a ton of research. They did base, certain things off, loosely off other things. But a lot of this stuff is just the writers made it up in the room. And like, I remember the first time when I went to an event like TechCrunch Disrupt or whatever. I remember I went to Dreamforce whenever it was, but the first Dreamforce that I went to. And I remember just walking around and seeing everything and being like, this is wild. Like all of this, everything, like this whole industry is just so rich. And like, you don't need to pull examples from reality to sort of paint a really good picture of who these characters are. And I think that because there's so much, oh, is that person, this person, is that person, this person, and people like get to think that, I think it added to the allure of the show. Oh, they're making fun of, Mark Benioff, or they're making fun of Peter Thiel, or they're making fun of, Gary or Larry Ellison, or like whatever. And it's like in reality that actually probably wasn't the case, but they just, there's enough archetypes there that they could tell a story that makes you think all of that.
And it gets people talking. Yeah. Right?
For
Debating.
Sure. Yeah. What other marketing takeaways do you have from this?
Oh, there are so many. But, one common theme across many of the episodes is that technology is hard to understand for the audience, even if the audience is the customer who's going to use your stuff. So how do you translate the power and value of your technology that can be easily understood? And that's where great marketeers come in. Right? We all know that content that works well is the content that's simple and easy to comprehend. But translating really complex technologies into simple to deliver messaging is an art form where, great product marketeers do a great job of that, and an average product marketeer may do a really poor job of it. So I would say, great technology needs a great story, right? The narrative is so important, and how you deliver the narrative and how you package it is key to the success. Because, when you take that technology, you package it, it's typically the front end of it. Yes, your campaigns might be running in the digital domain or otherwise, but the sales team, the scaled sales team has to deliver that. And you have to simplify so they can be trained and truly enabled for everyday calls that they have to make, whether it's a cold call or a response to an incoming query, whatever it might be. And so there's a wide variety of expertise and knowledge base that has to understand, that has to internalize, and then deliver it on a daily basis. So that art form is very important, so you can package it, translate it, and deliver it through the various channels. The other thing is, marketeers tend to rely so heavily on vanity metrics because it's easy, right? They tend to feel like they're the early indicators, the leading indicators of progress or lack thereof. And by relying on it, you can very easily fall into the trap of just getting a false read. So it's false positive in many cases. And you might go so far down on investment streams that are not appropriate, or you can't defend your long-term strategy. And in some of the episodes, Silicon Valley captured that notion. Another thing that comes to mind is, what do you promise? And how far in advance of reality do you go out to the marketplace? And this is a constant tussle between engineering, sales, and marketing that happens in every startup, where engineers say the product's going to be ready tomorrow, but can we start an early access program yesterday? And marketing, why aren't you pushing it hard enough? And sales, like, I need something to sell. That constant battle between sales, product, marketing that goes on, I think has been beautifully captured in a number of episodes in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
And it's a reality, right? You want to be just a little bit ahead of where the product is so that you can start to build that muscle. You can start to put the messaging together. You can be ahead of competition, but not so far ahead that when the customer is ready or the prospect is ready to engage, you just can't show up with the right product or with the ready product. And there your credibility is shot. And sometimes that can be very hard to recover from. So it's, the timing of when you take something to market matters. And I think we've seen a number of episodes where that was brought to surface quite nicely.
Yeah. The event one, another great scene when they go to the event and everybody's pitching from the stage and they all sound like the exact same. I was like, this is such a great marketing lesson where it's like, and you see that now, right? It's like every single company is this is an AI powered this. Like it's so static. The pitches are the same. I remember seeing that and just being like, oh my gosh, if this isn't the poster for why marketing is so important, I don't know what is, right? It's, just explaining literally exactly what you do in product and features versus telling the story that gets your customer, excited about solving something that they really need to solve.
And how do you stand out when right? Everybody is AI now. Everything is an AI wrapper on ChatGPT or something like that. How do you differentiate? How do you ensure that you're actually hitting the mark of the audience that you are trying to address? And I think that's where the average marketeer, right, falls to tried and proven formulas, which is exactly the wrong thing to do. You want to be unique. You want to be creative. You want to be specific to the audience that you're trying to get the attention of. And creativity and ensuring that you're relying on data and true honesty is so important.
I think that so much of in the VC world, a lot of, if you've heard the old adage, you overestimate what you can do in a year, but underestimate what you can do in 5. I think that's super true. If you were to look at things in a 5-year time horizon of hey, I'm going to run a marathon or something like that, and you gave yourself a year to do it, you definitely might be able to do it. But if you gave yourself 5 years to do it, you might run 3 marathons, you know what I mean, in that timeline. And I think that's being predictable and consistent as a marketing team is just as important as, doing stretch goals. And I think that's where that overpromising and under-delivering piece really comes into play. It's if you say that you can do everything, then, you're not going to be able to, and you're going to leave people sort of disappointed. But if you're able to hit the targets that you say that you're going to hit and be realistic with that, then, you'll be better off. And I'm curious, just in your career, how do you set a realistic target?
Yeah, and this is such an interesting topic and a current topic for us in marketing organization. And as I talk to my peers in the industry, it's a hot topic because you're exactly right. You want to build a marketing engine that's predictable, that's consistent, and that delivers day in and day out with a quality that everybody is pleased and we can be successful in the marketplace. However, now more so than ever before, there is a kind of a expectation that because you've got new tools, the teams could move faster and should move faster, which means the output volume should be a lot more, which means the creativity that comes out needs to be exponential. And so the expectation of the marketing team and function has always sort of been on a steady climb, so to say, but now it seems to be at another level. So it is almost becoming more important that you can transform the teams and the output faster now and not worry so much about predictability or sustained credibility or being able to deliver day in, day out. It is, what can you do better tomorrow than what you did yesterday? And I think we, as marketing leaders, have to be very mindful that not everything and everybody in every marketing organization can evolve and move at an exponentially improved pace because you have the tools. Yes, it has to move on that trajectory, but there has to be a level of reality put into that expectation. Otherwise, there's going to be burnout. There is likely to be a kind of implosion in teams that doesn't help or mid to long-term sustainability of organizations in general. So some sort of balance between predictable, sustained output, as has been the need for long, successful organization, merged and kind of in some ways infused with the new toolkit that's coming about to accelerate the output and perhaps to be able to move faster, be more efficient is really what is required. But we are in early innings of what's happening with Gen AI and all of the new tools are coming. So this is absolutely a hot topic that every single marketing leader is grappling with.
Yeah, I mean, it also just, as certain silos get demolished, it's really interesting. Being predictable is harder than it used to be, right? Literally, I don't know if you remember the book, Predictable Revenue. It's a great book, right? We all did that. email hi, take your team, you have your closers, you have your farmers, you have your, spears, you go down a predictable team, and like that playbook just doesn't really work the same way anymore. And just marketing is more complicated than it's ever been.
Yeah, it definitely is. And there are many new dimensions to marketing. I think particularly in the B2B tech space, where you've got almost a bifurcation of folks that use the technology but don't have any budget ownership versus people that have the decision-making authority and the budget ownership, but aren't necessarily very close to the technology. And I think marketing has to deal with that two-pronged approach in everything that it does. And the channels that get activated, the messaging that has to align with the audience, and certainly the content that has to be created. And that can be complicated. And if you layer PLG motion and the SLG motion that have to come into play in many cases these days, this becomes even more complicated. You want to give the practitioner the product-led growth angle, which is self-serve, easy for them to experience the value, it's zero friction, all of that, and consume the content themselves and hopefully raise their hands to buy the stuff or automatically with a credit card and purchase the technology, while you're also selling the ROI proposition to the head of engineering, the CTO, whatever the role might be. Balancing that is a nuanced execution for marketing teams. And not every marketeer has had the opportunity to go through those motions. And so many are learning through how do you balance the needs of the two motions, of the two audiences, while engaging both without alienating the other. And I think that can be a challenge to balance.
What's your content strategy?
We try to keep it fairly simple so the larger team can comprehend and deliver, back to your point, in a predictable manner. Right? One is highly targeted. So every piece of content is built for an audience. And if it's 2 personas, easy. If it's 4, that's okay. But it has to be very targeted. The second piece is it really has to ensure that the entire journey is covered. I've seen many cases where there's sort of peppered content that covers portion of the journey, as opposed to all the way from awareness, consideration, or decision. And if you don't have a full-fledged, comprehensive content stream, then your campaigns and the full journey just can't be served. And the third one is just content that's gone through rounds of iteration. It is, in most cases, not likely that the first salvo that you have in the marketplace is going to hit the sweet spot. And so you want to learn and continuously iterate and tweak and adjust until you feel like you've got the right target. So I think it's these 3 pillars that the team relies on and tries to ensure that the content plans that get built out are addressing and checking the boxes. So that's sort of how we try to drive and develop our content.
Yeah, and you mentioned this sort of like idea in the past of like practitioner versus decision maker, and like you want to target both of those different personas, obviously, because they're core to buying really any product, any tech product, but you need to hit both. But they're just the level of the utility of the content is usually completely different. I think this is like people really get this wrong. Is like the utility of what you're creating is just like very different. And I'm curious, just like, is there differences not only in like how you think about the content, but also just marketing to them, the 2 different groups separately?
Yeah, absolutely. And, in most cases, the practitioner, and if it's a developer, an AI engineer, they really don't want to be marketed to. They're the last audience that you want to have a developer marketing campaign for, right? What you want is giving them something that will make their lives easier in what they do every day. So will it make me solve my problems faster? Will it help me uncover my problems so I can get to them faster? Will it help me, give me tools that I will make less mistakes? Will it help me do more with less time so I can actually have my own downtime protected? All those things. And so they want tools that can educate them, that can make their daily life easier. That's all they need. So it's all about education when it comes to the practitioner, the users of the technology. And so for our approach to addressing that audience, it is about hands-on things. It is how-to, it is practical guides, it is workshops, it is training, and then kind of loosely connected to that is, do those things help them advance their careers? So are there certifications tied to this? Can they, put that on their LinkedIn profile? And by doing certain things on our platform, will they be able to have an expanded capability that can address multiple use cases, allow them to go in perhaps other adjacencies in their own careers is a second dimension to that. So we take an approach that's very much about educating the practitioner versus marketing to the practitioner. Certainly on the other side of the equation is the decision maker. And there they care more about lowered risk, better ROI, productivity, retention of employees, or hiring of developers. And so very different mindset. And there our approach is very much an economic proposition oriented. So the toolkits or the channels that we engage on are very different. We might do an economic model, or we might do a case study development that's done with their peer groups. Or we might do small roundtables, so where we are bringing a number of CTOs together. So it's a very different engagement approach with that audience versus the developer or the practitioner audience.
What's, you touched on this a little bit, but what's working for your audiences?
Yeah, I think the primary thing we find a lot of resonance with are these practical guides. How do I do something, right? If I'm a Java developer, how do I build the program with that language without inducing any risk, security risk, or improper quality of releases? If I'm building an AI application, how do I iterate my AI models so I'm not consuming a lot of infrastructure costs or computational resources that might lead to a lot of costs? How do I make sure that when I deliver something and release my software feature in the marketplace, it's going to hit the market right? The audience will appreciate it. So the how-tos is really what's working well. The short-form video content with an embedded storytelling comes alive, I think, for them because they can relate to it. How do I AI and how do I do this the right way? And so if I have a proxy of someone else solving the problem, I can simply replicate what worked for them and I can use it, right? And those types of studies and stories work very well because, it helps them solve their immediate problem. It helps them learn how to do something in the best way possible. So that's where we're leaning in heavily to deliver more of that type of content and with that format.
Yeah, the how-to stuff is it's so fascinating. I think the juxtaposition going forward of how-to content with people that are practitioners that are actually doing stuff on the ground and how they're actually thinking about investing and spending their time and doing things that are working with the combination of the deep research abilities of the AI tools is so crazy. Because then you can just merge those two together to make something that's you can build frameworks faster. You can test those frameworks faster. You can give real-time information. You can do the research there. It seems like those two things that how-tos are going to have, be on, are supercharged with the advent of, all of these crazy deep research models.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are taking advantage of all of that today.
Yeah.
There are tools that enable us to pull in, code snippets, examples of other things that are working well, merge with our own technology and showcase that as the best way of addressing a particular type of problem, a particular use case. And so ability to do those at scale and to replicate that has just, exponentially improved for our content marketeers. And so we are taking advantage of that.
That's really cool. You seem really dialed in on content as a CMO. I'm just curious, why is that? Why is this? It seems important to you.
Well, I think a CMO should run the entire marketing engine around content. And this is not to, invoke the old adage of content is king, but really, what are you at the end of the day delivering or communicating to your target audience, whether it's existing customer or a prospect you're trying to win over? It is content. And how you package that content, how you position it, what story and narrative is wrapped around the technology to deliver is really at the end of the day what matters. Everything else is just a mechanism. It's a channel. It's a tool. But what gets consumed is that narrative. That is the content that you're delivering. So I think whether it's your investment approach, whether it is how you structure the team, whether it's picking how you pick the channels, all of that is mapped to the core content. And so it's foundational to market.
What's one of your favorite pieces of content or campaigns?
So we ran something recently. We called it Bad Ship Happens. And it's a tongue in cheek, but, as software developers, everybody relates to the fact that you put something out and, you cross your fingers that it's going to work when it hits the market in production, right? In runtime, it won't have issues. And we have heard, obviously, horror stories on very large missteps and errors and challenges that have occurred because of poor releases. So, shipping software is full of chaos at the back end and risks at the front end when it gets in the marketplace. So we did a campaign around bad ship happens, but what can you do to mitigate the risks of bad stuff happening? Can you reduce that risk? Can you catch things before the customer feels it? What guardrails can you put in place so the developers aren't, spending much of the time on fixing the issues that are caught afterwards? Okay, perhaps address it before the point of actual production happens. So our technology at LaunchDarkly is about that. It reduces the risk of software releases. And that campaign was, in a very simple way, meant to do that. So we ran it at airports, we ran it on billboards in big markets, and got really a very significant return on that investment and resonance with the developer audience.
I love it. I love that also we've got your, in parentheses, rollback. That's great. So I have a question. You have a campaign like that, does really well. What's next? Are you like, hey, this worked so well. Do you double down on it? What do you do when you strike gold like that?
Yeah, I think it's always a tricky thing because freshness of content, freshness of themes is so important to keep the engagement going. So certainly we have managed to sustain and leveraging and benefiting from that campaign to a certain extent. But I think there is only so much of a time horizon that you can, get the return on that type of investment. So we are evolving from that and trying to run campaigns that are an extension of. So that campaign, we got the developer attention, but we also got the decision maker attention from that as a risk mitigation value proposition. We've extended that to run something that connects with it, which is protect your downtime. And we're running it in two formats. One is, protect your downtime, which means you don't want your applications to have a downtime. So do things right. So there's some downtime, but also protect your downtime for developers, which means you can roll something out on Friday and your weekend can be protected. So you can have a downtime because things will work well if you're following our guidance and how you leverage our platform. So we're playing on those things, which is about shipping software. That's not bad software. So it's an extension of it, but bringing some level of freshness to the theme and to the same message.
I love that. That's really fun. The protect your downtime thing, that's a brilliant campaign. So is bad ship habits. Yeah, the reason why I ask is I wonder because you're right, like messaging fatigues, the click-through rates, the whatever. But there's also that other adage where it's like when you create a great campaign like that, we're like, this is where, content series and other things like that come in, or segments, or, maybe this is a LinkedIn video series or something like that. But where you take this little mini thing that you made and turn it into more of a brand, you know what I mean? That you think about Budweiser frogs, right? Where you're like, or the Geico gecko or whatever. Like they have the caveman, they have the gecko, they have whatever else they have. But, there's certain things that you can sort of keep going. You can treat it more like a character or a theme or a through line. And there's other things that you shift off of. And anyways, it's just always interesting thinking of like when you do strike gold on a campaign that really resonates. Because and the reason why I bring it up is it is extremely clever, but it also it's pretty evergreen. Like 7 years from now, you're going to be like, yeah, bad ship still happens, right? It is something it's not going to evolve. Your product can't evolve past that. You know what I mean? It's like, that's always going to be the case. So anyways,
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point, which is, if you can land on something that's memorable and it creates an identity that your company can be associated with, that's memorable, that can live for a long time, and everything else can simply map back to it, then that's phenomenal if you can land on it. There are not many successful endeavors that have achieved that. And I think if one can land on it, that indeed is very, very powerful because your building of goodwill and brand goodwill is easier to do as you grow over time, if that's available to you.
Very cool. What about ROI? Content, ROI, sometimes at odds. How do you think about it?
Yeah, it's very important. I think measurement of ROI for an individual piece of content is hard and may or may not be that important. But I think measurement of a series of content around a campaign or a theme and what it can deliver to the business is very important. And I think you can take indicators that can be traffic improvement, it can be click-through rates, it can be downloads. All of those are early indicators and might be important. But at the end of the day, what matters is, did that deliver the business results? Was the impact felt by the business? And the bottom line is, did the ARR improve? Did the slope change? Did the friction reduce in the sales cycle so the velocity increased? I think those are the real measurements. And they take a bit of patience because you won't see that in perhaps the first week or the first month. But month 3, month 4, you should start to see some impact from these things. And, we've done a number of campaigns, launched a whole bunch of content. So yes, measurement is very important, both the leading indicators, but most importantly, the impact that the business feels from it.
What's one thing that's cool that you're excited about or working on?
So these days, it's all about, you have all of the tools at your disposal. What does that mean to the marketing team, right?
Yep.
And that is, it's very exciting. It's also kind of anxiety inducing for many folks in the marketing team. Is my job going away because the tool can do this faster, or will it be even needed because some other folks can do my role, right? And I think just as any technology, when it's brought to bear, there is an evolution and a path to something more sustained and things stabilize. We are in the early innings where it's just lack of clarity. We're seeing the benefits from many things on pace of content creation, on pace of ideation, on the ability to do the first 80% very quickly. But what I focus on with my team is to ensure that we are testing and trying these tools across the entirety of our workspace in the marketing team. And so we then adopt and deploy that gives us more predictable, sustainable, efficient engine in the long term. And today is more about testing and trying. And I think soon we'll have to get to what's truly in production. That is how a steady state is achieved.
What's a piece of advice that you would give to other CMOs who are trying to figure out how content fits in their overall marketing strategy?
Yeah, one of the things we touched upon earlier, which to me is very important, particularly first-time CMOs or early in their career marketing leaders, is don't get caught up in the hype. Yes, while you have to build momentum for your product, for the messaging you're taking out of market, the longer and the more you can anchor your messaging and positioning to data-driven, practical and pragmatic approaches, the better you will be long-term. The more you can sustain your messaging in the marketplace and differentiated presence in the marketplace. So that to me is the first one. And I think tied to that in the B2B world particularly is the fact that everything is nuanced. You have to learn to live in many shades of gray. And I think the better you can be, both from an IQ as well as an EQ standpoint, the better you'll be able to manage the team, scale with the businesses that you're driving, and be able to address the needs of the audiences. I think if you're always looking for 1 or a 0 in your decision-making and your execution, that can be hard to come by. And so the more you can live in the abstract world, the better it'll be as a marketer.
Amazing. Manish, this has just been wonderful conversation. Fun chatting Silicon Valley with you. Fun chatting the inner workings of the actual Silicon Valley marketing with you. For our listeners, go check out LaunchDarkly. Go nudge your developer. Go nudge your CTO. Go to LaunchDarkly.com. Any final thoughts? Anything to plug?
No, keep chugging away. This is a super exciting time with all of the tools coming our way as marketeers. There's no better time than to bring innovation, creativity to life at a faster pace and do more with less and do it better than ever before. So exciting times ahead for all of us.
Indeed. Couldn't agree more. Thanks so much. Take care.
Thanks, Ian.
Well, that's it for today. I hope you got some good ideas for your B2B content. Thank you for listening to Remarkable. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. Remarkable is created by the team at Caspian Studios, B2B podcast as a service. Caspian also creates fiction series for B2B companies, so if you want a business thriller, you can learn more at caspianstudios.com. Hollywood-style storytelling for B2B. And in today's episode, you heard from myself, Ian Faison, and Meredith O'Neill, senior producer here at Caspian Studios. Remarkable was produced this week by Meredith O'Neill, mixed by Scott Goodrich, and our theme song is Solomon by Falak. Be remarkable and rise above the noise.